Electrocast.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Western demands.
Now this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you. I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or Whatever Movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up? Welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host Iris. I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
Today we're talking a movie, the fifth installment of Teacher Month here at Or Whatever Movies from 1995, Mr. Holland's Opus.
One might say the culmination.
You love Mr. Holland's Opus.
And you didn't cry.
I cried, but perhaps not at where you might expect that I would have cried.
Oh, yeah? Do tell.
I had a cathartic release at the Rexall bus stop.
Because of his impropriety or because of your relief that he didn't take the bait?
Impropriety. Interesting word. Very telling, Wes. Do you think that he was improper?
Well, he lied to Iris about going to a party, poking his head in at an after party, and then he shows up in his suit at the bus stop. And then was that a smooch? It was enough, so I think that the pearl clutchers would be like, oh, he's doing it. Oh, no, it's a kiss on the cheek. But it felt like there was a lot there. You know, there was Rowena's theme and there was Iris catching on to that. I guess she was like, don't make a problem until there's a problem. But
Iris?
Yeah, she was going to let him make his decision and he ultimately made the right one. But I wonder if that had played out because he wasn't going to invite her to the bus stop.
She didn't call his bluff when he said, hey, you want to come? And she was like, yeah, no, I got to get Cole home. But had she called his bluff, it might have been an altogether different story. I came away from that scene believing that Mr. Holland behaved very humanly. Listen, the whole movie, I was like eked out about inappropriateness. I don't know why this whole teacher month, that has been like a theme.
There was some inappropriateness in this teacher month for sure.
And there has been some perceived inappropriateness as well. But the whole time I'm just like bracing myself for inappropriate teacher-student interaction. I'm just very sensitive about that kind of stuff now, yada, yada. I came away from that scene feeling like he acted very humanly, and in a very adult fashion, that he treated, what was her name?
Rowena Kazansky?
Oh, right. Rowena's theme. He treated her like an adult. And with the kiss moment, he treated her like a human.
Well, I guess the same couldn't be said. She appealed to his humanity, not morality, but she hit him right in the music feels, right? Oh, was your reaction to that scene not just because it was like, will he or won't he, but you could feel his trepidation, his pain. You could be writing great music and he gets that far away look in his eyes and you're like, uh-oh, she pushed the button.
Mm-hmm. It didn't seem like manipulation on Rowena's part. She seemed a little bit too innocent, maybe too naive for that. And I think that she was primarily acting out of fear. If she loved him, maybe she didn't fully understand that. If she wanted him to be there, you know, what that meant, how that played out in her mind, I don't think she fully comprehended. But what I think she did know was that she was afraid and that she wanted someone. She was probably confusing her affection for Mr. Holland with her need for a father figure.
Well, fostering her specific talent is what Mr. Holland could provide, where her dad was just focused on his restaurant, and so much so
Right.
that he would overlook her talent or her potential and be like, no, you're coming to work for my dream, not your dream. And yes, there was a lot of naivete. There was a lot where, she would kind of laugh nervously and he would steer her in the right direction. But as far as temptation goes, as far as sirens go, there was real potential and thus stakes for her drawing him away to kind of change his course in life and change his focus that would have brought him the success that he needed. Remember, as she said, I loved your class and everything. She's kind of speaking from a removed place where, they're not teacher and student necessarily anymore. She's the ingenue. And then he said anything under a buck, that he was going to buy her at the coffee shop. And she was like, I always loved your class. You always had a really developed sense of humor. And that felt like a not high school thing to say. And so I think she was positioned so that it could or couldn't happen. Who knows?
I think the emotional impact of this scene comes from both relief, although I never really believed that he was going to go, but also from a sense of resignation of Mr. Holland, what I perceived Mr. Holland accepting as, in a very Top Gun Maverick-y kind of way, this is where I belong. And the bittersweetness that comes with that, the sacrifice, but also the maturity and the understanding.
It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. You brought it around through a series of steps. There's a much more direct connection.
To Top Gun Maverick, tell me.
Absolutely. Her name was not Rowena Kazansky. She was Rowena Morgan. But in that one, she was Kazansky.
Wow, I knew I recognized. I was like trying to place her face the whole time. She's Iceman's wife?
Yep.
What?
I mean, Top Gun Maverick is great. This was like Forrest Gump as a music teacher.
Just like the unintentional, inspirational man who touches people's lives kind of unwittingly.
Yeah, stumbling through the decades and like 6 montages to timely rock and roll music to influence history and people and be completely oblivious the entire time. That's what he was doing.
It did seem like the marching band moment was important, was pivotal to the Mr. Holland character. He was kind of the reluctant teacher up until that point. And then he gets home and he's like, wasn't that fun? And it's kind of this unfettered childish joy he has about what could have been perceived as kind of a humiliating experience. Like he's in a little hat and he's twirling the baton and stuff.
Yeah. And didn't they then take that very important moment and immediately derail it?
Oh.
I particularly want to point out the way that information was revealed to his class. Maybe artistically the best moment in the film, at least for me. When he says he's looking right into the camera, he couldn't hear. And you hear Beethoven in the background and it feels like score. And we pull out to see that he's talking to his class about Beethoven.
Yeah.
Absolutely heartbreaking. And, kids are dumb and they don't sense that he's being profoundly affected by something in his personal life. But Mr. Holland, if he couldn't hear, how would he know? Like if he wanted to see, how did he even know what a C was? Because Beethoven wasn't born deaf. And you're like, oh no. Like I'm getting chills thinking about it. That teaching moment was so revelatory for the audience and not the audience in front of him that I thought was really well handled, really touching in a negative, not it was really effective, but in a heartbreaking way.
Yeah, I mean, they say in screenwriting that for a scene to be compelling, everyone has to have a secret. And whether it's revealed in that scene or afterward or to the audience specifically in a dramatically ironic way, that was definitely a secret at work.
Yeah, I think thematically it shifted, but his problem was the same. He was a failed composer. Nobody was listening. He took a teaching position, got a certificate to fall back on, was playing to deaf ears, was trying to teach these kids. As soon as he gets them in line, and wasn't that fun, and maybe he finds his footing, then he doesn't see its outlet or its application in terms of raising his son. More deaf ears that his passion, his focus couldn't ever affect, or he thought couldn't ever affect.
I was wondering about this. Do you think that Mr. Holland saw his son as an extension of his failure? And if so, At what point does that change? Because when they first enroll him in the private school, the school for the deaf and the hearing impaired, she says the parent crash course or immersive course is going to start. It's 3 hours a day, and he stops pretty much dead in the hallway. Like, okay. What I read into that was, I'm already teaching. I'm already doing driver's ed. I'm already doing individual student tutoring, and now I'm supposed to put 3 hours a day into learning sign language, not even to mention the time that I would spend on my opus. Like, I see the futility in his face where he's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And you know then that he's never going to fully connect with his son like his wife is going to. Like, there just wasn't enough hours in his day that he was willing to devote to this.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it was part of his failure. So my point is, I don't know that he took Cole's inability to hear. It was just another obstacle. My music? When do I have time to write my music? And just the teaching got in the way. Unfortunately, the thing that he loved and was passionate about didn't seem to have any direction because he couldn't find the time for it. And Cole was another limited direction. At that point, too, Iris was like, so go on, write your music. And she was all frustrated. And his son wasn't interested, or it wouldn't have the same effect. And that's got to be tough. It wasn't his personal failing. It was another source of frustration. You love your kids, but it hurts him that his kid can't enjoy what he has to offer. His whole purpose at that point was teaching music. Can't do that to Cole, or so it seemed.
You would think that if he just had an unabashed love for music and an optimism, that he would have made the best of the situation with Cole. But he didn't. He deliberately kind of turned away from him.
Let's put Cole in with the proteges, if that's the word we can use, because there were a number of them, starting with Gertrude Lang. She got to play in the thing, and then she was gone. And, great, hope it helped. And by the time that they reunited, when she was the governor of their great state, which turned out to be Oregon, it's been a long time. Mr. Holland hadn't seen her since she left class. Who was it next? Was it Lou Russ? And Lou Russ finally found the beat and could bang that drum, and then died right when Balthazar Getty came on board. Mr. Stadler, I think his name was. And Mr. Stadler disappeared. We didn't really get a resolve on that. And then we get to Rowena.
Well, but Stadler was at the concert.
Yeah, he was, but we don't know if music affected him. I guess it did because he showed up for the concert. But Rowena took his guidance and teaching and turned it on its ear a little bit, almost wrecked the whole operation, and disappeared. And the fact that we never got resolve on Rowena, that she didn't show up, was difficult. She would have been 15 years older, so she would have been in her 30s. That was frustrating, but I think kind of important. Maybe she didn't need to be the one. Maybe she was the more obvious one that he knew did okay. Unless she seduced his buddy that he was in a band with when he sent her to the buddy in the wife's house. They're expecting you.
She wasn't some little serial seductress. I think she serves a different function in the story overall. Like, the others serve to show his legacy and the impact that he had. They are the different notes in his opus, but Rowena was his foil. She was the one who was willing to risk it all to follow her dream. And that he was able to inspire that in someone, I think, was a little consolation to Mr. Holland.
Yeah, I suppose. But she was the most dangerous.
Yeah, you seem to have a lot of trepidation around Rowena.
And so all that said, then Cole falling in line was just a person that he didn't feel satisfied with his ability to help. Music was all he knew, and Cole maybe could never get a full grasp of it. Maybe like Lou Russ, that wasn't his focus.
Yeah, but wasn't it a knife to the heart when Cole is all like, you don't think I know who John Lennon is? You don't think that means something to me? I was like, oh. Everyone talks about the naturalism of Richard Dreyfuss's performance, but it is written into the characters. When these characters speak, they speak the truth, even if it's cliche. It's cliche for a reason because it's true. And when Cole confronts his dad, he's right. When Iris confronts Mr. Holland about the way that he's treating his family, she's right. And I think that's why the characters really sing.
Mr. Holland didn't have any pretensions. He didn't claim to be a great music teacher. He exhibited frustration with his students, to Mrs. Jacobs, to William H. Macy. He was kind of grumpy.
W.H. Macy.
W.H. Kind of grumpy the whole time. I honestly wondered if William H. Bill W.H. Macy took cues from Richard Dreyfuss in developing his character.
You mean like because he's legendarily cranky and stuff?
He's pretty cranky. And, it's not that he's cruel. He's just pretty bitter. And also, I found this out. Did you see that Richard Dreyfuss doesn't like rock and roll? Hates the electric guitar?
Really?
Was acting out the words in the script, but doesn't understand the influence, especially of rock and roll, on kids and how they wouldn't understand or appreciate classical music. And he thinks that's a travesty. It's very in line with the William H. Macy character.
How funny.
That's your money saying it's time for a McDonald's run. Because with new McValue at McDonald's, you get more than you expect. Like buy a 6-piece McNuggets and add a McChicken for just $1. Your money says let's go. Get more than you expect with new McValue. Prices and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
W.H. Macy, it's so weird that he's credited like that. He also doesn't age in this movie. Did you notice that he rocks the flat top through like 4 decades?
Oh yeah, the flat top, that takes commitment. You actually have to train your hair to be in a flat top. That's what the barber told me, and I was like, nah.
Really?
Yeah. He said,
like you mean you have to like brush it?
Right, because the whirl in your hair and the way your hair lies, you have to train it to all stand up, including the one side where it naturally goes down. And I was like, he told me that after. He's like, you got to put it up. You got to like train the hair to stand up on that side so it makes it flat. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Isn't the whole point of the flat top that it's supposed to be effortless?
Maybe the shaved head thing, but the flat top is a look, and that was W.H. Macy's focus, maintaining that flat top. It represented a level playing surface and thus a level teaching surface, and it was reliable and dependable and all straight lines. We're talking about Teachers Teacher Month, shaping young minds. Give those minds a compass.
That was the whole exchange with the principal, right?
Yep, Jacobs gave him a compass, which was a little bit clunky, but he got it.
It was also such a sweet moment when she said that he was her favorite, but why did it make me sad?
Well, she was basically the nemesis. She was on level with W.H. Macy's character, until she saw some reason. She was the stern disciplinarian or whatever, just trying to fill them with knowledge, yes, but also, give them a compass. But she said, that is a reasonable answer, Mr. Holland. I can go to the school board with that, the parents' meeting or whatever. And she understood what he was going through, even though she couldn't give him enough slack to tell him that. And that is the one thing that Glenn Holland was searching for. Somebody who understood his position, even if they didn't understand his music or his personal convictions or passions.
So he wanted to be understood as a composer beyond a music teacher, and she wanted him to understand that in order to really make an impact in his position, it can't just be a 9 to 5, clock in, clock out kind of a situation.
Yeah. His biggest sadness about Cole was when John Lennon died, and you come to a thing that requires discussion. And he said, you wouldn't understand. Turns to walk away, and he's heartbroken about that. And then Cole stops him dead and says, I do understand, and I do care about you. You're my father. Of course I care about what you do. And it honestly seemed like a revelation to him. That was the beginning of the turn, as much as it seemed like a difficult moment. Because then immediately it was Ray Charles on top of the stacks and turning up the volume in the middle of the night.
But I think I put my finger on it, Wes, when you were talking about the exchange with Cole. I think that Mr. Holland is a man who wants to be appreciated for his talent. And the most frustrating or heartbreaking thing about his son's disability is what he perceives as his inability to appreciate his father for what he does. And when he finds out that he can, but just in a different way, it changes their whole dynamic. Mr. Holland is a man who wants to be appreciated, who doesn't? And he finds that as a big fish in a small pond. You know, his impact was big, but in a small way, you know, affecting a small sample of people. I mean, Gertrude's speech is kind of uncomfortably on the nose. She spends a good amount talking about Mr. Holland's failure.
Misspent.
But
he isn't rich and he isn't famous.
And you're kind of like, ugh. And then you see him kind of swallow that morsel of truth. But then, you know, is this life, and is this more real life than the heroic save the world stories that Hollywood likes to spit out?
I mean, I do think important that it was a small town, because she qualified with he isn't rich, he isn't famous, at least not outside of our little town. The idea that Portland is a tiny little baby community, because that's where that high school was located, okay. But it was enough so that in the big, I mean, I went to a massive public school, both for high school and college. You went to a smaller college, maybe for a more intimate experience. And I obviously remember there were a couple of very limited classes with like 9 to 12 people sitting around a table, literature classes. And those are the discussions I remember. They're more intimate. They're not droning. There's no personal attention in those giant stadium lecture halls, you know. They just go right by you, and there are notes on a page. And the personal interaction, I think, that was required for him to, you know, where they would spend their own weeknights going over the curriculum for a relatively small student body. It was much more personally involved in the way that I imagine small towns would be. I think one of the things with Cole that was his misstep was what he said to Gertrude Lang. He said, you know, is it any fun, Miss Lang? You know, and I wanted it to be. And he realizes that it's all the technicality to her. She messes up that note, and she's trying to play the notes in front of her that she already knows in her head. And breaking down, I think a very important scene was Louie, just like, they can't play. They're doing the same 3 chords. They have no harmonies whatsoever, but it's fun. And that gets her on board, that if you're not having fun, it's not worth doing. And there could have been a fun element to all the stuff that Cole did. He could have been a drummer. He sets the beat, and he could feel the vibrations through the floors, the Sound of Music style. Can you not drum if the drumming is the backbone? I mean, yes, there are cues you need to pay attention to, but he could have, at least for the purposes of connecting with his son, put him on top of the speaker, feel the vibrations, hit the beat. This is rhythmic, this is important, like Lou Russ, like the marching band. And he could have clapped along, found a sense of timing, or etc., and in that way could have filled in the gaps and communicated with him musically, I guess.
See our discussion on Sound of Metal at orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts.
1,000 years ago. I'm just saying that he was apart from Cole, and he felt like Cole was too isolated to be reached.
Mm-hmm.
But look, that's all for the purposes of dramatic purposes of the movie. They need to come around.
I just feel like he was in this kind of constant state of victimhood, you know, not only about his son, but about his opus. You know, I kind of think that if that's really what he was destined to do, that he would have found a way to do it. He just had misplaced ambition in his life. If there was any waste in Mr. Holland, it was the time he spent misplacing his ambition. If he had simply channeled it into teaching, into what, was his reluctant calling, but ultimately his destined calling, imagine how much more of an impact he could have made. No?
Obviously, this was sort of a Nickel Boys thing where we were driving towards an ultimate reveal, and it doesn't have the emotional impact if he knows that the assembly is coming or whatever, the gathering for his send-off. And great, because it's nothing but his face, and you can see him almost cry several times. Really great emotionality from Richard Dreyfuss in that scene, which I think is the core of that scene, and we needed to drive to it. So lots of frustrations, lots of roadblocks along the way in order to sell that moment in what a kind of reveal or a denouement that I think that Nickel Boys couldn't match. Very important to get us to that place.
So you think that they were all very orchestrated, missteps and failings structured in order to build to that point?
I think so. And is this movie a little bit trite? Is it sappy? And we knew the reveal was coming. But I think all carefully placed to hit you right in the feels. So, because we went with them through history and through the era and saw kids prosper and kids almost derail his personal life and kids die in Vietnam. And it was timely and needed to come to a culmination of an entire life, and we needed to feel the scope and breadth of that life and his influence, where we at once think he's a failure and that he's frustrated and his grumpiness is justified, and then holy cow, it's true. He affected everyone, and his moment on stage conducting the American Symphony is justified and well-deserved.
I was thinking about the breadth of this movie. It feels like a movie that couldn't be made today, that wouldn't be made today, because it's kind of sprawling and introspective, and some people complain that nothing really happens, that there isn't a central dramatic question.
Not much of an edge.
Yeah, not edgy at all, and kind of very simple, not overly dramatized, like just very domestic and very sentimental. I don't know exactly what made me so uncomfortable about him signing and singing to Cole. I think it was that it was very intimate for a public setting, but also I think I was uncomfortable because I read on Cole's face that this is nice and all, but it doesn't make up for like years and years of disregard and neglect.
Glenn Holland's doing his best. It wasn't for Cole, it was for us. And what was your emotion? Because for me, it was a little bit cringe. I mean, I've seen that scene a lot of times. But the little warble and stuff, and I don't know if he can sing. He can obviously hold a note, but just barely. And I was like, oh gosh. And I don't think that was its emotional resonance or him reaching out and making his, bearing his soul to Cole. I could see how Richard Dreyfuss could prepare for that role and have it be emotional and scary and revealing and vulnerable because he can't sing very well. And he was right in warning those people.
I apologize in advance.
Oh, boy.
So, but was it like cover your face kind of cringe?
I don't know. Hopefully his signing was on par. I don't think he had an interpreter at that point, or did he? I think he did the signing for Beautiful Boy.
He did the signing.
And of course it was a John Lennon thing, and therein lies tragedy. It was not long after Lennon's death.
One IMDb reviewer very astutely cited a line. It says, life
is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans.
Yes. And how apropos that is for Mr. Holland's Opus.
Yeah, absolutely. Beatles lyrics and the members of the Beatles have impressions that echo decades later. Good scene.
Aww.
Little cringe.
Little cringe. Do you have a renewed appreciation for Mr. Holland's Opus in context of Teacher Month?
Yes, because I think this is the one that most closely demonstrates that teachers, they bring their personal lives to bear in their because if it's rote, if it's teaching from the text, if it's just stick to the lesson plan, those people aren't memorable at all. And music is a great expression for that passion, where he is not interested anymore in teaching them the scales. He wants to, look, I'm going to appeal to these kids any way I can, whether it's rock and roll or Beethoven, any tool at my disposal, paraphrasing. And his passion is evident, and that is what makes the connection between teacher and student, and so he can influence them. In this case, I'm going to say for the better. Like, as grumpy as he was at home and his own personal problems, I don't think he ever steered those kids wrong. It wasn't detention for detention's sake. It was to go to Lou Russ's funeral. It wasn't a note for the ingenue who could obviously sing and had a place. It was you have to feel it, and if you can't feel it, you can't sing it. And that's what made all these kids connect with him to show up, except for Rowena, who didn't get the connections she sought, and so she went to get it from his old bandmate.
Stop.
But
come on.
The teacher-student connection is what I was looking to explore this month, and how unconventional that can be. It's very important that these characters be human and flawed and scared and excited, and to influence the students accordingly.
Mr. Holland's Opus is the culmination of Teacher Month appropriately because it illustrates a teacher's ability to teach passion, which is perhaps the most transferable skill of all. Like across disciplines, if you don't have passion, you're not going to succeed, or you're not going to make a difference in your field. And what better subject to illustrate passion than music? It seems like a really appropriate vehicle to show the impact, the power of this teacher-student dynamic.
And a career-defining performance.
Richard Dreyfuss brings this performance to the character that Patrick Duncan created.
Teacher Month. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this theme month here at Or Whatever Movies. If you have recommendations for movies that you'd like us to discuss or additional themes for additional years, let us know. 818-835-0473 or whatevermovies@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.
Why is it that games make us feel so good or completely rage quit? These emotions we feel are mostly not an accident. People like me designed them. I'm Chris Cross, and this is Brain Arcade, a podcast all about the psychology of game design and why games hit us so hard. Each week, I bring on a new guest, designers, psychologists, storytellers, to break it all down with me. If you play, design, or just love games, follow now.
Electricast. Hi, I'm Sherilyn Fenn from Twin Peaks. What did you do on your last Saturday night?
Did you hear something?
Toilet paper.
There's nada. The reserves have gone dry. People are hoarding it. I should have done that.
They're all out of hand sanitizer at my Target.
Mark, when did you last watch the news?
We are getting reports of forced quarantines in China, Japan, and now Italy.
You're cutting onions in half and putting them around your apartment.
Yes, exactly. It kills the COVID.
Excuse me?
Let's go. Get in.
Vamos, rápido.
Have you ever driven one of these?
Never.
I'll drive, ladies.
I've got the keys.
Excuse me, I'm lost. I'm looking for my wife. I got turned around.
Join me, Eric Roberts, Jennifer Elise Cox, and Ed Asner for The Last Saturday Night, an Electricast podcast. You'll love it.
Electricast.